What's going on, everybody? This is Brian Mazik, aka Unique Mazik, the hardest working man in sports and gaming. And I got another historic basketball video for you. And this one's actually NBA 2K19 related, at least. So I don't know if you guys saw the blog, and it was basically talking about how you can import classic draft classes into your MyLeague in NBA 2K19. I'm gonna put the link to this blog in the description, but we're gonna talk about some of those classes. All right, don't forget to leave a like on this video. Also subscribe and click that notifications bell so you'll know when new videos drop. So the blog basically says they'll have the draft classes of 1960, 1965, 1969, 1970, and then 1974 all the way to the present. So I'm going to talk about some of these draft classes and some of the players that'll be in them, and some of the ones you might have to create because you will be able to edit to kind of fill in the blanks. So 1960 is for real, because the big O, Oscar Robertson. So you're getting the rookie Oscar Robertson. So I'm almost looking at this like, collector cards. Like, everybody wants to get a rookie card if you're trying to like collect baseball, basketball, football cards or what have you. You're getting a rookie Oscar Robertson that you'll be able to have him go through his entire career in your MyLeague. That is freaking nominal. It's what it is. But also in that draft, Zeke from Cabin Creek, the logo, Jerry West is also in that draft. So you got, but that's not even it, because there's more Hall of Famers in this draft in 1960. Not to mention some people that you might, like I said, I don't know how many other ones you're going to want to create, but the next guy coming up is definitely somebody who would be interesting. He went so Oscar Robertson went #1 in the draft. Jerry West went #2. Lenny Wilkens went #6. So Lenny Wilkens, one of the best defensive players in the history of the game, legendary head coach. But people, you might know him as a head coach, but Lenny was a baller too, especially with the St. Louis Hawks, and then with the Seattle Supersonics at the end of his career. Lenny was a baller for real, and then obviously he played with the Portland Trailblazers too. Lenny could play, but we talking about defense. We're talking about defense. Tom Satch Sanders, he looked a little strange on this picture, but he's actually quite the dignified older gentleman. From the Celtics dynasty, 1960 draft, he was a defensive specialist. You're wouldn't get a lot of scoring or whatever from Satch, but Satch was a straight, like, if you were talking about giving him an archetype, he is absolutely a lockdown defender. Now he's probably not going, he shouldn't be able to score too much. So we'll see how the ratings go, but yeah, he shouldn't be able to score too much. Also in the 1960 draft, you had Attles. That's him, #16, going for the rebound. Not getting it, actually, against Bill Russell. Bill Russell got most of those rebounds, pretty much against everybody, so don't blame it on Al. But that's another person in the 60 draft. Now, in terms of like really like mainstream names, these are probably the only ones that people really would recognize. Those are like the top 5 guys in win shares for their careers. So now let's flip this to the 1965 draft. And now I don't know if though all of those guys, I know Lenny Wilkens should be in the game. I believe he's in there before. Jerry West definitely, Oscar Robertson definitely. I think Tom Satch Sanders is in there. We have to see if they have license to use Attles. 1965, oh yeah, it's real. Rick Barry, you probably don't even recognize Rick Barry like this. From Miami with the little buzz cut, 1965. I mean, dude, he wasn't, like, check it out. Like, he wasn't even, like, where was Rick Barry picked? He was picked second. I'm sorry. No, yeah, second overall. So, who was picked ahead of him? You want to know who was picked ahead of him? Fred Hetzel. That didn't work out. Gail Goodrich was on this team as well. I mean, in this draft class as well. Rick Barry was the best player from the draft class, no doubt about it. And I know that he was already in 2K. He already had his license, so that shouldn't have changed. So should be able to have him. I believe he was on the, I'm pretty sure, I'm almost 100% positive, he was on the all-time Golden State Warriors roster. Gail Goodrich has been on the Lakers rosters, the classic Lakers teams, for years in 2K. Now this one I'm not sure about. Dick Van Arsdale. I don't know if he's going to be in there. He was not, I don't believe, on the all-time Phoenix Suns teams, and that's probably where he would have been if he was going to be on any of those teams. So, but he had quite the career. He's probably the third best player to come out of this draft. This was a pretty decent draft, though. Well, actually, a little more than pretty decent. It was pretty phenomenal, because then you also have Billy Cunningham, who's another Hall of Famer. He's in this draft out of University of North Carolina. And he was a stat sheet stuff. He only played 9 years, and he actually ended up being a coach for the Philadelphia 76ers in the late 70s or early 80s, I believe it was. I know it was the early 80s. I don't know when exactly he started. I didn't actually look that up. But I know when I was a kid, I'm telling my age, Billy Cunningham was like the first 76ers coach that I remember. So, yeah. 1965, also Butterbean, Bob Love. That's him there, number 10, coming off that curl to get that ball. He's probably gonna pull up and shoot that jump shot as soon as Clifford Ray hands him the ball. And because he definitely would shoot the mid-range pull up there, and also play in the post as well. But yeah, 1965 draft, Bob Love. Also in this draft, Jerry Sloan. I'm not gonna have a picture of him, but he's there. John McLaughlin. Tom Van Arsdale, which is Dick Van Arsdale's little brother, wasn't quite as good. Flynn Robinson was in that draft. Keith Erickson, who's already been in the game, he was in that draft. So this one was pretty good. Jim Washington. So now let's look at the 69 draft. And if you know your basketball history, you already know the crown jewel of the 1969 draft. This big dude from Power Memorial High School that went to the UCLA. Name was Lou Alcindor at the time, but Kareem Abdul-Jabba would become his name. Arguably the best center in the history of the game, arguably. You could make the argument that he was, or that he is the best center ever. But can you imagine having the opportunity to draft Kareem Abdul-Jabba, like, in your MyLeague? Come on, that's fire. Then you got Bobby Dandridge. Bobby Dandridge, a lot of people don't realize, Bobby Dandridge was actually involved in the trade, I believe it was. I think he was one of the key pieces in the trade that brought let's see, I'm trying to remember exactly how it was, because I know he was signed as drafted by the Bucks, signed as a veteran free agent in '77 with the Bullets. I thought he was involved in a really big trade, and I might have him mixed up with somebody else, but Bobby Dandridge was a heck of a player. Also, here you got Steve Mix. This draft, it was a little bit lighter towards the top, but you do obviously have Kareem. But Steve Mix had a good career. It just didn't, you know. He's not one of those names that you did just as a synonymous name with winning or whatever, but he did have a good career. You would think this guy here, who just went into the Hall of Fame maybe 2 years ago, JoJo White, who you can look and tell, JoJo White was a physical specimen at the time, a really good athlete, and a really good scorer for the Boston Celtics, but you're getting him as a rookie as well. So, and I got a couple other, well, at least one other person from the 69 draft that you'll have if you upload the 69 draft into your MyLeague. You also have Chicago Bulls legend, defensive stalwart Storm and Norm Van Lier. He's in there as well. You also have Lucius Allen. You got Bingo Smith, who was a Cleveland Cavaliers great. Butch Beard from the Nets. I don't know if Neil Walk will be in there. Neil Walk is kind of like a tragic story. He went number 2 in the draft after Kareem Abdul-Jabba, but he ended up paralyzed and wasn't able to walk. Yeah, he's actually in that draft too. I don't know how many other people they would get, but you know, it is what it is. 1970 draft. This is the Knicks actually won the championship that year. So it kind of broke up the Lakers Celtic kind of a monotony thing that was going on. You think you know, people trip me out. They talk about how the Warriors are winning. Imagine how people felt in the 50s and the 60s with the Celtics. You know, Bob Lanier here in this 1970 draft. People don't realize how good Bob Lanier was. He's one that might be one of the most underrated players in the history of the game. Yes, he's a Hall of Famer, but does he really get the real, like that real greatest, one of the best centers of all time type of treatment? I don't know that he does. I don't really know that he does, but he's right up there. He got 117 career win shares. That's a lot of win shares. Now, also, you got Dave Cowens. He's a Hall of Famer. There's a lot of Hall of Famers, a good amount of Hall of Famers in this 1970 draft. So, and this is not even the least of them, or not all of them, or not maybe, yeah, this is less than half. The two that I've already named is less than half. Cowens helped lead the Celtics back into another run, another championship run in the 70s. And now this guy coming up is one of the greatest Houston Rockets of all time, Calvin Murphy, one of the first really dominant, really good diminutive point guards. I believe Calvin Murphy is 5'9". So most of the like scoring records and big time records that Hakeem Olajuwon broke and now James Harden is challenging, Calvin Murphy set them. James Harden is probably going to pass Calvin Murphy for all-time lead in assists shortly, but Calvin Murphy was in the 70 draft. This man right here, Nate Tiny Archibald. You know, Kareem Abdul-Jabba once said that he was the fastest player with a basketball he ever saw. And, I mean, Tiny Archibald is still the only man in NBA history to ever lead the league in scoring and assist in the same season. Yeah, it's real. It's real. Tiny Archibald is a beast. You get him as a rookie. That's filth is what that is. That's just insane. Also, one of the best Denver Nuggets of all time, Dan Issel, is in that draft. Now, who I'm not going to show, you got Rudy Tomjanovich, Randy Smith, who is the all-time leading scorer for the Clippers organization, Sam Lacey, Pistol Pete Maravich, Jim McMillan, Gar Hurd, Billy Paultz, a really big-time shot blocker, Jeff Petrie. I think he is one of the all-time leading scorers, like in the top 5 in Portland Trailblazer history. That's a good draft, too. Now, 1974 is the last year I'm going to show in this particular video. I'm thinking about going through all of the drafts. You guys let me know in the comments if you wanted me to go through all of the drafts and kind of just talk about the different players that you'll have. But this one is an interesting one because the top pick in the draft was Bill Walton, and he was obviously a Hall of Famer, won a championship or 2 championships, one later in his career. But we got George Gervin, the Iceman, who actually proved to be the best player in this draft from a win share standpoint. #1 in win shares in that draft with 88.1. One of the most dynamic scorers you ever want to see. I mean, his game was Kevin Durant-ish, even though he wasn't quite as big as Kevin Durant. But the ease in which he could score from everywhere, yeah. Bobby Jones, to me, like when I was a kid, I loved Bobby Jones. Just his game, the way he played with defense first, also just the way he kind of carried himself too. I really dug Bobby Jones. He played for the 76ers team that was coached by Billy Cunningham back when I was a kid. But yeah, Bobby Jones was a beast. Big time two-way player for sure. Jamaal Wilkes had one of the ugliest jump shots ever. Just he would wrap it around his head, but that shot was butter for sure. He was a star at UCLA. He ended up, I think he began his career with the Golden State Warriors, but then he ended up with the Lakers, winning championships with the Lakers with that just like unblockable little mid-range jump shot that was so ugly. Like if you were a kid and they saw you shooting like that, they'd be like, no, you got to change that. But if you're Jamaal Wilkes is going in as much as he is, I guess you leave him alone. Now, also John Drew. John Drew would have probably been a Hall of Famer and like an all-time great, but he struggled with substance abuse and just personal problems, and it derailed his career. But he was on his way. He was an all-star, like 20-10 guy. He even ended up with 68.9 win shares, even though he had like this career that was just chock full of problems, but he still ended up getting there. Mo Lucas is in this draft as well. Mickey Johnson, Truck Robinson, Billy Knight, and of course Bill Walton, Campy Russell. Now Bill Walton's not up there in win shares because his career was so packed with injuries, but everybody knows what type of player he was when he was healthy. It was just he wasn't healthy that often. And it's crazy because the Walton and Lucas won championship together with the 77 Trailblazers, and they were actually drafted in the same draft. So that's interesting. But that's all I got for you in this particular video. Like I said, let me know if you guys want to see the rest of the years, and I'll kind of go through 5 years at a time the way I did here. Let me know in the comments. Like always, I talk sports and I talk gaming, and I always appreciate you watching. God bless and peace.
Pocket, I'll be weak. I'm rather unique.